In the late 1960s, in the quiet neighborhoods of Los Angeles, a series of brutal crimes began to unfold, crimes that would shock the nation, blur the line between manipulation and madness, and expose the terrifying power of control over the human mind. At the center of it all was a man who didn't just commit crimes. He influenced others to act on his behalf. This is the story of a man and the group that followed him. At first glance, he didn't appear powerful. He wasn't wealthy or widely influential, yet people feared him, and not physically imposing. But what he possessed was something far more dangerous.
An ability to influence, manipulate, and control people on a psychological level.
Manson's early life was unstable. Born in 1934, he spent much of his childhood moving between institutions, foster homes, and juvenile detention centers. He never experienced a stable upbringing, and from an early age, he became familiar with crime, manipulation, and survival. By the time he reached adulthood, he had already spent years in custody. But it was after his release in 1967 that everything changed. This was the era of counterculture.
In America, peace movements, free love, rebellion against authority.
Identity and purpose. And Manson saw an opportunity. He began gathering followers, mostly young, vulnerable individuals, many of them searching for belonging. He offered them acceptance, purpose, and a sense of family. Over time, this group became known as the Manson family. But this was not a family in the traditional sense. Manson established himself as the leader, the center of their world. He used a combination of charisma, manipulation, psychological pressure, and constant reinforcement to control his followers. He convinced them that he had special knowledge, that he understood hidden truths about the world, and slowly, he began shaping their reality. One of Manson's most disturbing beliefs was a concept he called helter-skelter.
He interpreted this phrase as a coming apocalyptic race war. According to him, society was on the brink
of collapse, and his followers would play a role in triggering and surviving this chaos. To outsiders, these ideas seemed irrational, but to his followers, they became truth. In August 1969, Manson's influence reached its most horrifying point. He instructed members of his group to carry out a series of violent acts. The goal was to create fear, chaos, and confusion, actions that he believed would help ignite the events he had predicted.
On the night of August 8th, members of the Manson family entered a home in Los Angeles.
Inside were several individuals, including a well-known actress who was in the late stages of pregnancy. What followed was a brutal and senseless act of violence that shocked the nation. The victims were killed, and the crime scene was left in a way that suggested something deeper. Messages written, symbols left behind. The next night, another set of murders occurred. This time, the victims were Leno and Rosemary LaBianca. The pattern continued. Violence combined with symbolic actions meant to send a message. The public was terrified. These were not random crimes. They felt calculated, almost theatrical. The brutality, combined with the strange details left behind, created a sense of fear that spread far beyond Los Angeles. But at first, investigators struggled to connect the dots. There was no immediate link between the victims, no clear suspect, no obvious motive. It wasn't until later that the truth began to emerge.
Members of the Manson family were eventually arrested, but not initially for the murders.
They were picked up on unrelated charges. It was during this time that information began to surface. One of the key breakthroughs came from within the group itself. As investigators pieced together testimonies, a disturbing picture formed. The individuals who carried out the murders had done so under his direction. He had not personally carried out the actions, but he had orchestrated them. The trial that followed became one of the most infamous in American history.
The man and several of his followers were formally held in connection with multiple serious incidents.
The courtroom became a stage, not just for justice, but for the world to witness the extent of Manson's influence. Even during the trial, his control over his followers remained visible. They echoed his beliefs, displayed loyalty, and behaved in ways that demonstrated just how deeply they had been influenced. The prosecution argued that Manson was the mastermind, that he used psychological manipulation to turn ordinary individuals into participants in violent acts. And in the end, a final decision was reached. He was held responsible and received a lifelong outcome. The case left a lasting impact on society. It forced people to confront uncomfortable questions. How could one individual influence others to such an extent? What makes someone vulnerable to manipulation? Where is the line between belief and control? A criminal investigation, it became a study in psychology, influence, and the darker side of human behavior.
He remained in custody for many years, continuing to speak publicly and maintain his identity.
As a figure of fascination and fear, he died in 2017, but the impact of his actions continues to be studied and discussed. What makes this case so disturbing is not just the violence, but the idea that the person behind it didn't need to act directly. He created a system, a belief structure, a mindset that allowed others to carry out his intentions. And that raises a chilling thought. Sometimes, the most dangerous individuals are not the ones who act, but those who influence others to act on their behalf. This story serves as a reminder that control can be invisible, that influence can be powerful, and that under the right conditions, the line between right and wrong can become dangerously blurred. And as history has shown,
that kind of power can leave a mark that lasts for generations.